The rice fields of Cypress Hall hide more secrets than gold beneath their murky waters. In 1716, South Carolina, power is measured in acres and souls, and Silas Whittaker has plenty of both, until a single glance at forbidden skin shatters his certainty. They say a master owns everything except conscience, but when Amma's eyes meet his across a blood-stained cloth, something dangerous awakens. Her healing hands hold knowledge he needs. His signature holds freedom she craves. Between them stretches an impossible distance, bridged only by whispered choices that could destroy them both. If this forbidden tale calls to your soul, subscribe now and tell me where you're watching from. Dawn light seeped through the study windows at Cypress Hall. Silas Whittaker hunched over ledgers, tallying numbers by candlelight. The quill scratched against parchment as he recorded bushels of rice harvested from the tidal fields. His fingers bore ink stains, evidence of hours spent maintaining order. Ezekiel Bragg's boots sounded on the portico before he entered without knocking. "Incident with the girl, sir. Mercy's apprentice. Handled it myself." Silas felt a tightening in his chest. "Explain." "Insolence." Bragg's face remained impassive. "She questioned the water management schedule." "Was she wrong?" Silas asked, his voice clipped. "That ain't the point, Mr. Whittaker." Bragg's eyes narrowed. "Discipline must be maintained." The air thickened with unspoken tension. Silas turned a page in his ledger, revealing columns of careful numbers. Each figure represented his control over the plantation, the workers, himself. "I require an assessment of her work capacity," Silas said. "We can't afford inefficiency during harvest season." "She'll be useful by tomorrow," Bragg assured him. "I was economical." Miriam appeared in the doorway, her morning dress already perfectly arranged. "You're attending service today, brother? Appearances matter." "When have I missed Sunday worship?" Silas asked. "When ledgers call louder than scripture," she answered with a tight smile. Bragg stepped back, deferential to Miriam's presence. His obsequious bow made Silas's stomach turn. Behind Bragg's civility lurked something cold and calculating that Silas chose not to examine. A young house servant appeared at the door, breathless. "Sir, Miss Mercy requests your presence at her cabin. Urgent," she says. Silas stood, straightening his waistcoat. The request was unusual. Mercy rarely summoned him to her domain. Something significant had happened. "Now?" Miriam asked, disapproval evident. "Estate matters require attention at all hours," Silas replied. As he moved toward the door, Bragg watched with unblinking eyes. The overseer's stillness unsettled Silas more than any protest could have. The first hairline crack appeared in his composure. Pine resin and smoke filled Mercy's cabin. Morning light streamed through small windows, illuminating the scene on the low cot. Amma lay face down, her back exposed. Mercy pressed a linen cloth against fresh lacerations. The door opened. Silas entered, removing his hat. His eyes adjusted to the dimness. "What's the meaning of this summons?" he asked. Mercy straightened, her weathered hands still holding the cloth. "You should see Bragg's work, sir. Judge for yourself if this improves your rice yield." Silas felt anger rising. "I'll examine the damage." "You'll do no such thing without permission," Mercy said, standing her ground. "This girl isn't a field to be inspected." The silence stretched between them. Mercy had served his family for decades, earning certain liberties with her speech. Amma's voice broke the tension. "I consent, on one condition." Silas turned toward her, surprised. Her voice was clear, measured, not the tone of someone recently disciplined. "What condition?" he asked. "No one touches without my permission?" Her eyes found his, direct and unwavering. "Not you, not Bragg, not anyone." Silas's breath caught at her audacity, yet something in her gaze held him fixed. "Agreed," he said finally. Mercy stepped aside, allowing him access. As Silas lifted the cloth, his hand shook at the sight beneath. Fresh wounds crossed older scars. The pattern told a story of repeated discipline that went beyond correction to cruelty. "This is—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "Efficient?" Mercy asked, her voice sharp with accusation. Amma remained still, her breathing steady despite the pain she must have felt. Her dignity in this moment struck Silas like a physical blow. He replaced the cloth gently, unable to meet her eyes. Without another word, he turned and left the cabin. The image seared into his mind. His hands trembled all the way back to the house. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the yard. Amma moved through her tasks with quiet precision, harvesting medicinal herbs from Mercy's stores. She felt Bragg's eyes drilling into her back, but refused to acknowledge his presence. Workers moved around her, careful to maintain distance. Word had spread about the morning's confrontation at Mercy's cabin. Silas crossed the yard, rigid posture betraying inner tension. He paused near the water pump, watching as Amma instructed a young field hand about gathering cattail roots. "The tide gate needs adjustment before sunset," Amma said to the boy. "Tell Marcus the pin is loosening again." "Don't fill the boy's head with your concerns," Bragg called, approaching with measured steps. "Gate management isn't your domain." Amma fell silent, eyes downcast. The survival mask slipped into place. Silas stepped closer. "What about the gate?" "Nothing to trouble yourself with, sir," Bragg interjected. "Woman's talking nonsense." "I asked her," Silas said, his voice sharp. Something shifted in Amma's expression. Calculation flickered behind her eyes. "The western gate pin is wearing," she said carefully. "If it fails during tonight's high tide, we lose the new seedlings." "Nonsense," Bragg scoffed. "Gates were checked last week." "Pin was replaced with green cypress," Amma countered. "It's too soft for the brackish water." A distant rumble of thunder punctuated her words. Dark clouds gathered over the marsh, promising a heavy storm. The air thickened with humidity and tension. Bragg's face darkened. "This is insolence, sir. After yesterday's correction, she's still—" "Check the gate," Silas ordered, cutting him off. The yard fell silent. Workers paused, sensing the significance of the moment. "Sir?" Bragg's voice held warning. "Now," Silas insisted, "before the storm breaks." Amma's eyes widened slightly, the only indication of her surprise. Bragg's jaw clenched as he nodded stiffly and walked away. Silas had made a decision he couldn't take back. The first drop of rain hit the dust at his feet. A line had been drawn. There would be consequences. Rain lashed the dike line with relentless fury. Night had fallen early under the storm's black canopy. Amma struggled with the stubborn gate pin, water already seeping through the weakening structure. Lightning flashed across the sky, revealing the damaged mechanism. The replacement pin Bragg had installed that afternoon was already swelling, threatening to split. "We need to brace the hinge," she shouted over the storm's roar. A lantern's glow appeared through the downpour. Silas approached, rain plastering his shirt to his skin. He carried wooden tools and rope. "Show me," he called. Without hesitation, Amma directed him. "Hold the brace here. The tide's rising fast." Together they worked against the surging water. Amma's knowledge guided their efforts with measured authority. Her hands moved with practiced skill, securing the temporary repair. "The rope through here," she instructed. "Pull it tight." Silas followed her directions without question. The natural order had inverted. He became the instrument of her expertise. More lanterns approached through the storm. Bragg led several workers toward them, his face a mask of fury when he saw Silas following Amma's lead. "Sir, what are you doing?" he demanded. "Saving the rice crop," Silas answered, securing the final knot. Bragg pointed at Amma. "This is rank insubordination. She's commanding you like—" "She's preventing a disaster," Silas interrupted. "One you nearly caused with poor materials." The workers exchanged glances. Never had they heard Silas contradict his overseer so publicly. "I'll handle her punishment myself," Bragg insisted. "There will be no punishment," Silas said. "Her judgment was sound." Amma's eyes found his in the lantern light. Something unspoken passed between them. Acknowledgement, perhaps. Recognition. "Sir, the men are watching," Bragg warned, voice low. "Consider what this looks like." "It looks like competence recognized," Silas replied. "The gate holds. That's what matters tonight." Lightning illuminated the shocked faces of the gathered workers. In one exchange, everything had changed. The storm raged on, but a different kind of thunder rumbled through Cypress Hall. Dawn light filtered through the study windows, casting long shadows across Silas's desk. He dipped his quill and began drafting new work notes. His handwriting betrayed his inner turmoil, letters slanting more sharply than usual. "Specialized knowledge of tidal patterns. Valuable asset to plantation operations," he wrote. The door opened without a knock. Miriam entered, her face tight with concern. "Talk spread, Silas," she said without preamble. "The quarters buzz like a disturbed hive." Silas felt tension spread across his shoulders. "About?" "You and the healer's girl." Miriam lowered her voice. "Standing together in the storm, following her orders." "We saved the western fields," he replied. "Nothing improper occurred." "Propriety isn't measured by your intentions," Miriam cautioned. "It's weighed by appearances." A soft knock interrupted them. Amma stood at the threshold, eyes downcast in practiced deference. "You requested my presence, sir," she said. Silas straightened. "Enter. Close the door." Miriam's eyebrows rose, but she remained silent. "I'm reorganizing certain work arrangements," Silas explained, indicating his notes. "Your knowledge of the tidal cycles is valuable." Amma's voice was measured. "I have conditions." Miriam gasped at her audacity. "Speak," Silas said. "Daylight tasks only. Mercy present for any medical work." Her eyes found his. "No assignments that separate me from the quarters at night." The underlying meaning was clear. She sought protection from Bragg without directly accusing him. "Agreed," Silas said, the word representing his first visible surrender of control. Miriam opened her mouth to protest, then closed it, watching her brother with new eyes. Outside on the portico, a shadow shifted. Bragg stood by the column, listening. His jaw set in rigid lines as he heard Silas accede to an enslaved woman's terms. The balance of power had begun its subtle shift. Nothing at Cypress Hall would be the same again. Sunlight streamed through the parish church windows as Reverend Hale's voice resonated through the whitewashed sanctuary. Wealthy planters filled the front pews, household servants and trusted workers stood at the back. Amma stood among them, feeling the congregation's stares. "Obedience brings order," Hale preached. "God ordained authority for our protection." Silas sat in the Whitaker family pew, unusually rigid. He had not looked toward the back of the church once, though Amma felt his awareness of her presence. "Charity toward those beneath us reflects Christ's love," Hale continued. "Kindness without permitting disorder." Miriam glanced back, her eyes briefly meeting Amma's before sliding away. The message was clear. She watched, concerned about what others might see. When service concluded, congregants spilled into the churchyard. Amma helped an elderly house servant into the shade while straining to hear nearby conversations. Whitaker's methods seem unorthodox lately, a neighboring planter commented. Silas maintained his pleasant expression. Efficiency takes many forms. Reverend Hale approached, his clerical collar stark against his black coat. A word, Silas? They moved towards the oak trees, but not far enough to prevent Amma from catching fragments. Appearances matter greatly, Hale cautioned. The community notices unusual arrangements. My estate management is my concern, Silas replied. Your standing affects us all, Hale pressed. Miriam joined them, her voice pitched low but urgent. Perhaps removing the source of speculation would be prudent. Remove? Her word carried clearly to where Amma stood. Send her to another property, Miriam suggested. Just until talk subsides. Amma felt her chest tighten. Separation from Mercy, from the relative safety of Cypress Hall, would leave her vulnerable. Plantations further inland were known for harsher conditions. She returned to the quarters with the others, a new line hardening in her chest. Whatever fragile understanding had formed between her and Silas now seemed as fragile as morning mist. Survival would require new calculations. Afternoon light slanted through the windows of the big house office. Silas spread blank parchment across his desk as Amma entered, Mercy following close behind. You understand title cycles better than anyone on this estate, Silas said without preamble. I need detailed charts. Amma assessed the room carefully. Where will I work? Here, Silas indicated a small table near the window. With conditions, Amma stated, not asked. No proximity without my say. Mercy's expression remained neutral, but approval flickered in her eyes. Understood, Silas agreed, surprising both women with his immediate acceptance. Amma moved to the table, accepting the charcoal Silas offered without allowing their fingers to touch. She began marking the parchment with precise lines, creating a grid for the lunar cycle. The spring tides come 3 days after the full moon, she explained, her voice gaining confidence as she worked. Gates must be secured before then. Silas watched her hands move across the parchment. Where did you learn this? My mother, Amma answered after a pause. Before she was sold downriver. The room fell silent except for the scratch of charcoal on parchment. Unspoken tension hummed between them, acknowledgement of the power he wielded over her existence. Mercy visited briefly throughout the afternoon, bringing water and checking on Amma. Each visit steadied the air, reminding both Silas and Amma of boundaries that could not be crossed. As afternoon faded toward evening, Amma gathered her work. I'll continue tomorrow. The chart is excellent, Silas said, examining her progress. Your knowledge is valuable. The word hung between them. Valuable, not as a person, but as an asset. Yet something in his tone suggested growing recognition of the difference. Amma left the office, stepping into the corridor. Bragg appeared from the shadows, blocking her path. His thin smile sent a chill down her spine. Working late with the master, he observed, finding new ways to be valuable. His implication hung in the air like poison. Amma stepped around him without reply, feeling his eyes follow her retreat. The game had become more dangerous. Dusk settled over the courtyard as workers returned from the fields. Amma crossed toward the kitchen garden, basket of herbs in hand, when Bragg's voice cut through the evening air. Hold there! Workers paused, conversations dying. Bragg strode into the center of the yard, 2 men flanking him. Insolence cannot stand, he announced. The woman Amma has overstepped repeatedly. Tonight she receives correction. Fear rippled through the gathered people. All knew what Bragg's correction entailed. Amma stood still, calculating her options. Running meant worse punishment later. Begging meant surrender of the dignity she'd fought to maintain. Footsteps sounded on the portico. Silas emerged from the house, observing the scene with narrowed eyes. "What's happening here?" he demanded. "Discipline, sir," Bragg replied. "For the healer's girl, her continued insolence requires—" "Under whose authority?" Silas interrupted. The yard fell silent. Even the birds seemed to hold their breath. "Mine as overseer," Bragg said, confidence wavering slightly. Silas stepped between Bragg and Amma. "No longer." He pulled a folded paper from his waistcoat. "New estate policy. Corporal punishment for skilled workers requires written authorization, specifically from me." Gasps rippled through the gathering. Never had such limits been imposed on an overseer's authority. "This protects the estate's valuable assets," Silas continued. "Nothing more." But everyone present understood the truth. He had publicly shielded Amma from Bragg's retribution. "Sir," Bragg's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper, "the men are watching." "Let them," Silas replied. "Let everyone see how Cypress Hall protects its investments." The paper in his hand represented an irreversible public commitment. Miriam watched from the doorway, her face pale with shock. Bragg's eyes promised retribution as night fell over the plantation. This challenge would not go unanswered. The first battle had been won, but a war had just begun. Firelight danced across worried faces at the quarter's common area. Amma helped Mercy tend to a feverish child, while whispers swirled around them like smoke. "Master's taken a special interest in you," an elderly woman murmured. "Dangerous attention." "He values my knowledge, not me," Amma replied, wringing out a cool cloth. "Knowledge, beauty, doesn't matter why a hawk circles," the woman warned. "Its shadow still falls on the same chicken." Mercy's weathered hands moved methodically, preparing a willow bark tea. Amma negotiated terms. She wasn't granted favors. A young field hand spoke up. "Bragg says she's protected now. Says Master changed rules for her." "I'm not protected," Amma said firmly. "I'm working within negotiated terms. My safety depends on all of us maintaining trust." The gathering fell silent at her words. They understood her meaning. Suspicion within the quarters could prove as dangerous as Bragg's malice. Hidden in the shadows beyond the fire's glow, Silas stood listening. He had come to speak with Mercy about a sick house servant, but stopped short when he heard the conversation. Amma's words struck him. Despite his intervention, she claimed no special status, offered no display of gratitude or relief. Instead, she focused on preserving community bonds. He watched her gentle movements as she tended the child. Her face in firelight revealed a dignity that transcended her circumstances. Not submission, but strategic patience. Silas stepped back, unwilling to disrupt the scene with his presence. Tomorrow he would formalize what he could control: work schedules, punishment guidelines, skilled labor recognition. The rest, the growing awareness of Amma as more than property, remained a dangerous current he dared not name. As he turned toward the big house, doubt shadowed his thoughts. Whose salvation was he truly seeking with these changes? Hers or his own? Night concealed his troubled expression as he walked away from the fire's warmth toward his solitary rooms. Morning light illuminated columns of figures in Silas's study. He calculated the value of skilled labor, creating a new ledger separate from field hands' records. His quill scratched against parchment, assigning monetary worth to knowledge. Miriam entered without knocking, her face tense with concern. "What are you doing, Silas?" she asked, glancing at his work. "Establishing value," he replied without looking up. "Whose salvation are you buying?" Miriam challenged. "Amma's or your own?" Silas's hand stilled. The question struck too close to his unexamined motives. "This is business," he said finally. "Nothing more." "Business doesn't explain the risks you're taking," Miriam persisted. "Bragg spreads rumors. The council questions your judgment." Their conversation halted at a knock. Amma stood at the threshold, summoned to verify title notations. Miriam stepped back, watching carefully as Amma approached the desk. The young woman moved with measured grace, maintaining precise distance from Silas. "These calculations," Silas indicated the tide charts. "Verify them." Amma studied the parchment, her finger tracing the lines without touching his handwriting. "The spring tide comes earlier in August. You're off by 2 days here." Her correction was delivered without apology or hesitation. Silas felt a curious sensation. Not anger at being contradicted, but relief at being corrected before making a costly error. "Fix it," he said, offering his quill. Amma accepted it, carefully amending the figure. Her script flowed alongside his, different yet complementary. "Your hand is educated," he observed. "Mercy taught me," she replied, simply. "For recording treatments and dosages." Miriam watched this exchange with growing unease. The ease between them, however professional, represented dangerous territory. When Amma departed, Miriam approached her brother's desk. "You're playing with fire." "I'm recognizing valuable skills," Silas countered. "Skills or the woman who possesses them?" Miriam asked softly. Silas had no answer that would satisfy either of them. Afternoon sun beat down on the local storehouse, where plantation owners gathered for the quarterly council meeting. Silas entered to find conversation halting at his appearance. Whitaker, Jameson, the senior planter, acknowledged him coolly. "We were just discussing labor management." Silas took his seat at the long table, a topic of perpetual interest. Bragg stood against the wall with other overseers, his presence unusual at such meetings. The calculated glance he exchanged with Jameson confirmed Silas's suspicions. His overseer had been sharing plantation business. "Word reaches us of your innovative methods," another planter said. "Restricting traditional discipline, I hear." The challenge hung in the air. Silas maintained his composure, though his collar felt suddenly tight. "Gentlemen," he began, "I've implemented an efficiency code. Nothing more revolutionary than proper asset management." He withdrew the document from his coat. "Skilled labor requires different handling than field work. A carpenter's hands must remain uninjured to build. A healer's knowledge must be preserved to serve." Several men leaned forward, commercial interest temporarily outweighing disapproval. Plantation management, after all, was ultimately about profit. "Results?" Jameson asked bluntly. "Production increased 8% since implementation," Silas answered. "Injury-related work delays decreased by nearly a third." Nods circulated, though suspicion lingered in many eyes. Practicality warred with tradition. Reverend Hale sat observing, troubled but intrigued. His voice carried moral weight in the community. "This system recognizes specialized skills," the minister noted. "Not individuals, I presume?" The distinction was crucial. Reform of methods, not relationships. "Precisely," Silas confirmed. "Pure economic efficiency." A messenger interrupted, bringing news that shifted the conversation entirely. "Low-pressure system forming offshore," he reported. 3 days out at most." The threat of a hurricane immediately consumed their attention. Crop protection trumped philosophical debates about management styles. As the meeting adjourned, Silas caught Bragg's eye across the room. The overseer's expression remained impassive, but something in his gaze suggested the battle had merely changed venues. The storm approaching from the ocean might prove less dangerous than the one brewing at Cypress Hall. Noon sun blazed overhead as workers gathered in the courtyard, Silas stood on the portico steps, a parchment in his hand. Beside him, Reverend Hale observed with careful neutrality. "New regulations for Cypress Hall," Silas announced, his voice carrying across the yard. He began reading the formal code aloud. "Corporal punishment restricted to documented serious offenses, skilled workers to receive written citations before physical correction." Murmurs spread through the crowd. Such limits on punishment were unprecedented. "Medical authority granted to Mercy Tab for treatment decisions," he continued. "No worker to be denied healing when injured." Amma stood near the kitchen garden, her face carefully composed. Only the slight trembling of her hands betrayed her reaction. "Lastly, recognition of specialized knowledge," Silas concluded. "Those possessing skills valuable to plantation operations will receive task assignments rather than gang labor." He nailed the document to the announcement post where all notices were displayed. The sound of each hammer blow punctuated the extraordinary moment. Workers dispersed slowly, conversation hushed but intense. Nothing in their experience had prepared them for such a declaration. Bragg approached the post after the crowd thinned. His knife tip pierced the document, leaving a neat hole through the word "no" in the punishment clause. "Interesting reading, sir," he said when Silas approached. "Almost suggests the natural order can be improved upon." "Efficiency isn't revolution," Silas replied coolly. "Merely sound business." Some might disagree. Bragg's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Council members, church elders, those who understand that order requires enforcement." Reverend Hale joined them, his presence tempering Bragg's barely veiled hostility. "Bold steps, Silas," the minister commented. "I hope wisdom guides them." After they departed, Amma approached the notice. She read it aloud to several women who couldn't read, her voice steady despite the significance. The air trembled with cautious hope. A fragile new reality had been declared, in writing, in public. But Bragg's glare promised that the cost had only begun to accrue. Pre-dawn mist shrouded the marsh as Amma made her way along the dike path. Her early rounds checking water levels had become part of the new order at Cypress Hall. The rising sun turned fog into a golden veil across the rice fields. She reached the western levee and immediately sensed something wrong. Water seeped through where none should flow. Upon closer inspection, she discovered a plank loosened from its moorings. Not broken, but deliberately unsecured. The tide was rising rapidly. Within minutes, the weakened section gave way entirely. Water blasted through the opening, flooding the path where she stood. A child's scream cut through the morning air. Little Sarah, the cook's daughter, had followed Amma on her rounds, and now stood directly in the surge path. Without hesitation, Amma plunged toward the child. The current pushed against her legs with frightening force as she fought her way forward. "Hold on!" "Hold," she called, reaching for Sarah's outstretched hands. She grasped the girl just as the water knocked them both off balance. They tumbled together, Amma twisting to keep Sarah's head above water. Shouts announced others arriving. Silas led the group, wading into the surge without hesitation. "Give her to me," he called, reaching for the child. Amma passed Sarah to him, then scrambled to examine the broken levee. "This was secured yesterday," she said. "The wood's been cut partway through." Silas handed the child to a worker, then joined Amma at the breach. "Sabotage," he said grimly. "But who would risk the entire crop?" Bragg arrived with more workers, quickly taking control of repair efforts. His expression showed appropriate concern, but his eyes revealed no surprise. "Found something, sir," called one of Bragg's men, holding up a small wooden token, the kind Amma used to mark medicinal plants. "Interesting location," Bragg remarked. "Right beside the breach." Silas's eyes met Amma's. Doubt flickered across his face before he could mask it. "I didn't," she began. "Evidence suggests otherwise?" Bragg interrupted smoothly. The trap had been laid with insidious neatness, a token that shouldn't be there, a breach that threatened lives and livelihood. And Amma caught at the scene. The fragile trust between them faced its first serious test. Late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the portico as Silas paced. Workers struggled to repair the breached levee while he confronted difficult questions. Miriam sat in a wicker chair, her face drawn with worry. "This can't continue, Silas. The risk is too great." "I don't believe Amma sabotaged the levee," he said, voice low. "It makes no sense." "Sense isn't always relevant," Miriam replied. "Perception creates its own reality." Their conversation halted as Amma appeared at the garden path. She paused, clearly hearing their exchange. Miriam continued, unaware of her presence. "You must send Amma away for her safety, before worse happens." Amma's face remained composed, but Silas saw something closing behind her eyes, a wall sliding into place. She had heard the words, "send away," before, at church. Now they came from within his household. "Amma," he acknowledged her. "I didn't see you there." "I brought the title charts," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "As requested." Miriam rose, discomfort evident. "I'll leave you to business matters." When they were alone, silence stretched between them. The ease of their previous working relationship had vanished, replaced by wariness. "You heard my sister's concerns," Silas finally said. "I did." "I haven't made any decision," he added quickly. "I intend to investigate the sabotage fully before taking action." Amma's voice remained measured. "Investigation changes nothing if minds are already decided." "Mine isn't," he insisted. Their eyes met, testing the truth of his words. The distance between them had grown in more ways than physical space. "The charts," she said, extending the parchment without stepping closer. From the shadow of a column, Bragg observed their exchange. His expression revealed satisfaction at the new tension between them. The knife of doubt had found its mark. Silas watched Amma walk away, her posture rigidly formal. The wall between them now felt insurmountable. The carefully constructed new order at Cypress Hall balanced on a knife edge. Evening shadows lengthened in Silas's study. Candles illuminated the tension on his face as Amma entered with Mercy beside her. The older woman's presence served as both chaperone and witness to whatever would unfold. "You requested my presence," Amma said, her voice formal. "Yes." Silas set aside the ledger he'd been reviewing. "About the levee incident." Amma's eyes found his. "Have you reached a conclusion?" "The token wasn't yours," he said directly. "Examination proved it newer than those you use. A poor imitation." Relief flickered across her face, quickly controlled. "Then you know I didn't sabotage your property." "I do." He gestured toward the chairs opposite his desk. "Please sit." Mercy and Amma exchanged glances before taking seats. This invitation, to sit in his presence as equals in conversation, represented another boundary crossed. "I have a proposal," Silas began. "One that might resolve the increasingly complicated situation." Amma's voice was steady. "I have conditions of my own." Mercy's eyebrows rose at her directness, but pride shone in her eyes. "Speak," Silas invited. "I will continue seasonal work only if manumission is drafted," Amma stated, "for myself and 2 kin upon successful harvest." Stunned silence followed her declaration. Even Mercy seemed taken aback by the boldness of the demand. Silas's breath caught. "You ask the impossible." "I ask for paper and ink," Amma countered. "Nothing more difficult than what you've already done with your code." The audacity of her request, not begging for favor but negotiating terms, left Silas speechless momentarily. Who would witness such a document? He finally asked, the question itself an admission that he considered it possible. Reverend Hale, Amma suggested. His moral authority would deter challenges. Silas rose, moving to the window. Freedom papers for a skilled worker wasn't unheard of in the Low Country, but rarely for one so young and valuable. After a long silence, he turned. I agree. Mercy gasped softly. Shall we send for Reverend Hale now? He asked. When the minister arrived, he listened to the proposed arrangement with evident conflict. Fear and duty wrestled in his eyes as he stared at the draft document. His quill hovered over parchment. With a shaky sigh, he signed. The candle flame shivered in the sudden release of held breath. Twilight painted the drying sheds in purple shadows. 2 weeks had passed since the manumission draft was signed. The harvest had begun to cure, rice stalks hanging in neat bundles within the long wooden structures. The air smelled of drying grain and river water. Silas walked the perimeter, inspecting the quality of the crop. This harvest would determine whether he honored the agreement with Amma or found reason to nullify it. Amma appeared at the far end, checking moisture levels with practiced hands. They worked in necessary proximity these days, their conversation limited to weather patterns and harvest yields. The eastern field produced well, Silas noted, maintaining careful distance. The adjusted water schedule improved the grain fill, Amma replied. Their professional exchange masked the tension beneath. Since the agreement, a nervous hush had settled over Cypress Hall. Workers watched their interactions with wary curiosity. Miriam maintained polite distance from both of them. Bragg walked the plantation perimeters like a storm seeking landfall. His outward compliance with the new code barely disguised his simmering resentment. "Will you remain in the area?" Silas asked suddenly. After... The unfinished question hung between them. After freedom. After everything changed. Amma's eyes found his. That depends on what remains for me here. The ambiguity of her answer stirred something Silas dared not examine too closely. Movement near the back wall caught his attention. Bragg stood watching them, his stillness more threatening than any action. "We should return," Silas said. "Night approaches." As they moved toward the main path, a flicker of light flared behind the shed wall. Within seconds, flames licked upward along the dry wooden slats. "Fire!" Silas shouted. Orange light illuminated their shocked faces as the wall of fire climbed higher, threatening months of work and the promised future it contained. The peaceful false calm shattered into crisis as the flames roared toward the main storage area. Everything now hung in the balance. Night transformed into hellish day as flames engulfed the drying sheds. Amma organized a bucket line from the nearby pump, her voice cutting through the chaos with surprising authority. "Form 2 lines. Keep the water moving." Workers responded instantly, fear of the fire overriding normal hierarchies. Silas worked alongside them, his coat discarded, sleeves rolled up as he passed buckets with the rest. He moved toward the main doors, axe in hand. "We need to create a break. Stop it spreading to the stored grain." The heat pushed against him like a living force. Sweat poured down his face as he swung the axe, splintering wood to create a gap in the burning structure. Mercy arrived with more workers, her elderly frame belying her strength as she directed efforts to save what could be salvaged. A cascade of burning embers rained down as part of the roof collapsed. Amma darted forward, helping a young worker who had frozen in terror. Someone shoved her from behind, pushing her toward the falling debris. Silas saw the movement and lunged forward, pulling her clear but taking a blistering cinder on his forearm in the process. Pain seared through him, but he maintained his grip on her arm until they reached safety. "Who pushed you?" he demanded, scanning the crowd. Before she could answer, Bragg appeared, his face streaked with soot. In his hand, he held a charred scrap of parchment. "Found this by the western wall," he announced, "where the fire started." Silas recognized the remnant of Amma's title charts. "Seems someone had reason to destroy evidence," Bragg continued, voice pitched to Carrie. "And the harvest with it." Amma stood straight, her eyes never leaving Bragg's. "Convenient you found that so quickly." The accusation in her tone was unmistakable. Around them, workers watched the confrontation with wide eyes. Silas's burned arm throbbed as dawn began to lighten the sky. The night of ash had changed everything once again. The fire in the sheds was dying, but the one between them burned hotter than ever. Dawn light revealed the charred ruins of the drying sheds. Smoke still rose from blackened timbers as the plantation community gathered in the courtyard. Exhaustion marked every face after the night's battle against the flames. Amma stood in the center, Mercy at her side. Both women's dresses bore soot stains and burn marks from their efforts. The sound of approaching horses announced visitors. County men rode into the yard, led by Magistrate Collins. Their early arrival suggested Bragg had sent for them during the night. "What's happened here, Whitaker?" Collins asked, dismounting. Before Silas could answer, Bragg stepped forward. "Arson, sir, and we have the culprit." He pointed directly at Amma. "The woman set fire to destroy evidence of her earlier sabotage." Murmurs rippled through the gathered workers. Many had seen Amma fighting the flames all night, risking her own safety to save others. "She should be punished according to law," Bragg insisted, "for destruction of property and endangering lives." Collins looked to Silas. "Is this your assessment as well?" Silas's bandaged arm throbbed as he considered his response. Everything hung on his next words. "I request a formal hearing," he said finally, "before the parish council." Bragg's face darkened. "The evidence is clear. Why delay justice?" "Because justice requires full examination," Silas replied, "not hasty conclusions." Amma stood straight-backed through this exchange. Unlike most accused, she didn't plead or prostrate herself. Her dignity remained intact, a silent declaration of innocence. "The girl stays confined until then," Collins decided. "She'll remain in my household," Miriam announced, stepping forward unexpectedly. "Under my supervision." All eyes turned to Silas's sister in shock. Her intervention was unprecedented. "Until the hearing," she clarified, her voice steady despite the attention. "I'll ensure she appears when summoned." Collins hesitated, then nodded. The word of a Whitaker still carried weight, even in unusual circumstances. As the officials departed, Miriam approached Amma. "Come. You need rest and clean clothes." The courtyard slowly emptied, leaving Silas alone with the knowledge that the next few days would determine not just Amma's fate, but the future of everything he had built. He couldn't turn back now. Morning light illuminated the parish storehouse, where Reverend Hale posted the hearing summons. 3 days had passed since the fire, just enough time for tempers to cool and rumors to multiply. Silas arrived with ledgers under his arm, wage records, repair documentation, and the manumission draft. Each represented evidence of his reformed management and Amma's value to the plantation. "You're determined to proceed?" Hale asked, voice low. "I am." "The council is divided," the minister warned. "Some see your changes as threat to the natural order." "Is justice not part of that order?" Silas countered. Hale sighed. Justice wears different faces depending on who seeks it. Across the settlement, Amma sat in Miriam's sewing room, preparing for the hearing. She had spent the intervening days in a strange limbo, neither servant nor guest in the Whitaker household. "How will you address the council?" Miriam asked, arranging Amma's borrowed shawl. The garment was plain but clean, appropriate for the serious occasion. "With truth," Amma replied. "Dignity always." Her steady gaze caused Miriam to look away first. "I was wrong," Silas's sister admitted suddenly. "When I suggested sending you away, it wasn't hatred that moved me." "It was fear," Amma finished for her. "Yes." Miriam's hands stilled. "Fear of change, of what people would think, of what might happen to my brother's standing." Amma regarded her silently, hearing the confession but withholding the absolution Miriam clearly sought. Forgiveness, like freedom, could not be demanded, only freely given when earned. "I hear you," Amma said finally. The response was neither rejection nor acceptance, but acknowledgement of Miriam's truth without surrendering her own dignity. As the hour of the hearing approached, both women prepared to face the community's judgment. Whatever came next would reshape all their lives irrevocably. The clock struck 10. It was time. Midnight oil burned in Silas's study. He sat alone, papers scattered across his desk, property deeds, account books, letters from his father describing the family legacy. All the trappings of a planter's life surrounded him. He lifted an unsigned sale contract Bragg had pressed upon him months ago. The document would have transferred Amma to a distant plantation for a considerable sum. He had refused then, without examination. Now he understood why. The revelation came not as comfort, but as his deepest fear realized. Losing his estate, being scorned by peers, admitting complicity in a system he had never before questioned. Silas held the contract over the candle flame. The paper curled, blackened, then burst into brief flame, a literal renunciation of old power. Across the plantation in Miriam's guest room, Amma knelt by the window. Moonlight silvered her face as she whispered prayers taught by her grandmother, words in a language Cypress Hall had never managed to erase from her memory. "Give me voice," she murmured. "Give me strength to speak truth before those who would deny it." Her fingers traced the thin scars on her palms, remnants of her first rebellion years ago. She had been a child then, learning the cost of defiance. Tomorrow she would risk everything on the belief that truth could overcome power. In the overseer's quarters, Bragg cleaned his pistol by lamplight. His face revealed nothing as he methodically prepared for all possible outcomes. The council might favor Whitaker's wealth and standing, but Bragg had cultivated his own alliances among neighboring overseers who shared his vision of proper order. 3 souls stared into separate abysses as night deepened toward dawn. Each recognized that whatever emerged from tomorrow's hearing would forever alter the delicate balance at Cypress Hall. Morning would reveal which vision of the future would prevail. Noon sun beat down on the crowded courtyard. The parish council, 5 senior planters including Jameson, sat at a table beneath an oak tree. Reverend Hale stood nearby, his presence lending moral weight to the proceedings. Workers from surrounding plantations gathered alongside Cypress Hall residents. Word of the unusual hearing had spread quickly through the Low Country. Silas stood to one side, Miriam beside him. Bragg waited confidently with several overseers from neighboring estates. All eyes fixed on Amma as she stepped forward when called. "Unusual to hear the accused speak first," Jameson noted with disapproval. "I requested it," Silas said, "as this concerns my property." Jameson nodded reluctantly. "Proceed, then." Amma stood straight, her voice clear and steady. "I did not set the fire. I did not sabotage the levee. Both acts would harm not just the plantation, but people I care for in the quarters. She described the pattern of events, the token planted after the levee breach, her efforts fighting the fire, the suspicious discovery of her charred maps. I have no reason to destroy what might secure freedom, she concluded. Every reason to protect it. Mercy stepped forward next, corroborating with dates and times. She produced her medical log showing treatments for workers injured during the fire, including Amma's burned hands from rescuing fallen buckets. She fought that fire harder than most, Mercy testified. Why destroy what she helped build? Silas presented the draft of manumission and the wage ledger. These documents show Amma's value to Cypress Hall. They also demonstrate her motivation to maintain, not destroy, the harvest. Hale confirmed his witnessing of the agreements. The documents bear my signature. Their terms are clear and binding if the harvest succeeds. Murmurs rippled through the gathering. The evidence mounted in Amma's favor, but doubt still clouded many faces. Bragg stepped forward for his moment. Pretty words and paper promises, he said dismissively, but who found her token at the levee? Who discovered her charts at the fire's origin? His implication hung in the air, evidence too convenient, too perfectly placed. Who indeed? Silas responded pointedly. The challenge was clear now. Not just Amma's actions, but Bragg's were under examination. The moment balanced on a knife edge of revelation. The courtyard fell silent as tension peaked between Silas and Bragg. Their confrontation had shifted from subtext to open challenge. You accuse me? Bragg's voice rose in theatrical outrage. After years of loyal service? I question convenient evidence, Silas replied evenly, and timing that benefits certain interests. Bragg lunged forward suddenly. This woman has bewitched you, turned you against natural order. Men moved quickly to restrain the overseer as he reached for Amma. His composure shattered, revealing the rage beneath. She should be whipped, sold, made example of. Spittle flew from his mouth as he struggled. You've all gone soft. This is how order collapses. The council members exchanged alarmed glances. Bragg's loss of control did more to vindicate Amma than any testimony could have. Jameson rose, his authority silencing the commotion. Ezekiel Bragg, you are relieved of duties pending full investigation of these matters. Bragg's face contorted with disbelief. You side with him? With her? We side with evidence and comportment, Jameson replied coldly. Neither favors you at present. The overseers who had supported Bragg stepped back, unwilling to associate with his disgrace. His isolation was sudden and complete. As Bragg was led away, Miriam stepped forward. Until this matter concludes and papers are finalized, my household extends protection to Amma. Her public declaration, not just temporary shelter but active protection, sent another ripple of surprise through the gathering. Silas addressed the stunned audience. Cypress Hall will continue with its established code, transparent accounts, medical oversight, recognition of skilled labor. He looked directly at neighboring planters. Any who wish to examine the economic benefits of these methods are welcome to review our ledgers. The crowd fragmented, some nodding approval, others scoffing, many simply watching in shock. The natural order hadn't collapsed, but it had certainly shifted. As the gathering dispersed, Amma stood in the center of the courtyard, neither celebrating nor retreating. This victory was meaningful but incomplete. True freedom remained to be secured. Late afternoon sun bathed the gallery in golden light. Silas stood at the railing, watching workers return to their tasks after the dramatic hearing. Footsteps sounded behind him. Amma approached, stopping at a respectful distance. The council ruled fairly, she said. Justice occasionally prevails, he replied, even here. Silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable, but weighted with unspoken questions. The crisis had forced revelations neither had been prepared to confront. "What does freedom look like to you?" Silas asked suddenly. "Not what you think I want to hear, the truth." Amma's eyes found his. "Choice, written and honored." "Nothing more?" he pressed. "Everything begins with that," she answered. "The rest follows from choice freely made." Silas nodded slowly. He moved to his study, returning with documents in hand. "Manumission papers," he explained. "Finalized for you and your two named kin, effective upon completion of the season." Amma's breath caught as she examined the papers. Her fingers traced the official seals and signatures, tangible proof of future freedom. "There's more," Silas continued. "River margin plots, registered as independent leases. Once free, you'll need land to sustain yourselves." Her eyes widened slightly, the only betrayal of her shock. Land represented security few freed people ever obtained. "Why?" she asked simply. "Because order built on injustice eventually collapses," he replied, "and because you showed me a different path." Amma nodded slowly. "I will remain through season's end," she said, "by my choice, paid for my work." The distinction was crucial, not obligation but decision, not servitude but employment. For the first time since they had met, they shared an unguarded breath. No touch passed between them, but their held gaze contained recognition of possibility. Not now, perhaps not ever, but the choice would be theirs to make as equals. The sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the gallery in deepening amber light. Dawn painted the marsh edge with pearly light. Several months had passed since the dramatic confrontation. Spring rains had returned, bringing new life to the low country. Seedlings sprouted in the cooperative plots under Amma's direction. The land she now legally managed produced early vegetables and medicinal herbs alongside experimental rice variants. Silas approached on horseback, dismounting at the field's edge. He carried tools and maintained respectful distance, a neighbor offering labor without claiming authority. "The northern section drains well," he observed. "No longer the master, but a man with agricultural knowledge to share." "We deepened the channels last week," Amma replied. Her voice carried the quiet confidence of someone standing on her own land. Workers moved through the field, some still bound to Cypress Hall, others free men and women earning wages. The strict hierarchy had softened into a system not yet equal, but moving toward fairness. Reverend Hale arrived for the scheduled blessing of new plantings. His initial discomfort with the changed arrangements had gradually transformed into cautious support for reform. "The Lord blesses those who honor their word," he declared, eyeing Silas meaningfully. Miriam appeared with fresh bread, her offering a tangible apology for past fears. She had discovered unexpected strength in standing, against convention. The naming ceremony began for crops and sections of land, an African tradition Amma had resurrected openly. Names spoken in her grandmother's tongue honored ancestors and claimed the earth anew. As evening approached, Amma walked Silas to the property boundary. Their conversation remained focused on agricultural matters, but underlying currents of possibility flowed beneath. "Will you attend the Harvest Festival?" he asked. "As a free woman," she confirmed. "On my terms." The distinction needed no elaboration. Whatever relationship might develop between them would begin from equality, not obligation. Later, Amma closed the door of her small but private cabin. The simple act of controlling her own threshold symbolized everything she had fought to achieve. "No one owns my yes," she whispered, touching the manumission papers kept safely in a carved box. Outside, spring rain began to fall, nourishing seeds planted in newly turned earth. The season of growth had just begun.